for those who've been around for a bit, I will probably sound like I'm just telling you things that you've heard 1,000 times, but for the newer people, hopefully there may be something in it. So I do want to talk about submissions. So I'm calling myself an 8th-month veteran, and one of the things that stands out in the Commission is submissions when they come through, and you know, they're an important part of the process, particularly with the Fair Work Commission, because as you know, we like all our witness statements and everything in writing up front, so we know what's coming. Now, in terms of what could go wrong, you'd think, well, look, it shouldn't be that hard to make the submissions. There's a point, there's some facts, let's put it together. Look, I can tell you that the submissions that we get come in all different shapes and sizes. And I've actually had some unrepped applicants, remarkably, who have made exceptional submissions. I had one woman who made some of the best submissions I'd ever seen, including some submissions on 596 and why the employer should not be allowed to be represented. And in fact, the dilemma I had was that if I didn't let them be represented, it looked like this unrepresented applicant would walk all over them. So fortunately, we resolved it in conciliation, and I never had to face the dilemma, but it was there. I have had some absolutely appalling submissions from lawyers. Just appalling. And in one particular case, I was so incensed at the poor quality of those submissions that I thought, I'm just going to cut and paste these into my decision and put all the little SICs in there, you know, about 4 per paragraph. And so, you know, the submissions we get, they do come in all shapes and sizes, and we get some really good stuff and we get some really bad stuff. And if you're going to make submissions, you want to be in the really good stuff tent, I think. Now, as Pearl said, if there's one thing to take away from her presentation, it's don't lodge parvo applications on Friday afternoons, and amen to that. I also am going to just make one point, and it's this. You would be astounded at some of the stuff that we get in the Commission in terms of submissions from people. And the point is, you might think that submitting, and I'm not making this up, 300 plus pages of submission is a really great thing. Someone has to read it, they have to absorb it, and they have to try and make sense of it. And look, it wouldn't surprise anyone to learn that sometimes sitting in your office at 7:30 at night, starting on reading some submissions from somebody who's put together 300 pages of piffle, there is injudicial language, and there is frustration, and there's no brownie points for the people who serve it up. So, some examples of the stuff that we get. I've had 132 pages, and not one sentence of it was relevant. Now, of course, for the Commission members, we've got to read it. I mean, I can't just look at it and just assume, well, that's all rubbish. I've got to read those 132 pages. And when I get to the end of it, I think about that hour and a half that I've lost from my life forever. And again, no brownie points for the person who served it up. I've had a 148-page annexure that contained not one relevant word. Again, I've got to read the whole thing, just in case, particularly with unrepped applicants, because they hide stuff in there. Occasionally you'll find on page 87, paragraph 4, oh, right, that's what they're talking about. So no one likes this. I've also had some interesting things. I've had a picture of an applicant's dinner, and when I asked him at the hearing to sort of contextualise that in terms of his case, he did struggle to do so, but he was awfully proud of his cooking. I've had someone submit a photo of their dead mate in submissions. I have no idea what was the idea behind that, but nevertheless, that's what we got. So we have a folder in the Commission's file marked "Members' Eyes Only," contains graphic material. So people do strange things. The other one that I love is the stream of consciousness. And you get this from the unrepped apps a lot. You know, you're reading and you're thinking, Yeah, all right. I mean, there was one chap there, I understand that when he was 18 he had a motorbike accident, and I know where he went to school. I know, that his parents were very good. We've no idea what his case is about, but, a lot about him as a person. So, again, whatever you send in, somebody at the other end has to read all of it. They've got to make sense of it, and they've got to try and absorb it and make a decision based on it. So be concise. Be concise as you can. Find the heart of the matter that you've got, whether it's an unfair dismissal or whatever, and get to the guts of it. Don't worry about the fluff. You've got to go right to the heart of it, present that. This is our case. This is what we are saying. Contextualising is great. I know people love to contextualise, the applicant was born in 1975 and attended such and such a high school. His parents were of modest circumstances and blah, blah, blah. It's not necessary. It's just not necessary. As someone once said, and I don't know who it was, it's better to have 2 killer arguments than 15 mediocre arguments, because by the time the commission has got to, 15th, we say such and such, we're just thinking, well, we're just being buried in dross here. So, for some of the basics, check your work. In my former life as Secretary of the STA, I was somewhat amused to receive an application for a job once from someone who, in their written application, extolled the virtues of their written communication and said it was brilliant, in a paragraph that contained 4 grammatical errors. It stands out. When you get this, and look, I get it from some of the law firms along the terrace. Grammatical errors. I've got one at the moment that I'm dealing with where the person, I know what they're actually saying, but they've actually said the opposite of what they're trying to say. So if you can get someone to just cast an eye over it, proofread it, it'll help. You won't get them back with a red pen saying, no good, please resubmit, or F, must do better. But it makes a difference. It makes a difference when you get professional, well-written submissions. I think I'm giving the game away here a little bit, Commissioner.
Speak for yourself.
If you lob up with your submissions in a form being cut and pasted, I'll tell you what, that's not a bad idea. Any of the members of the Commission will tell you, any of the ones that I've spoken to, the hardest part of the job is writing decisions. It is just, the conducting conferences and trying to settle disputes is all good, clean fun, but writing decisions is a real drag. And if your submissions are all over the place and the Commission member is trying to say, okay, well, the applicant submits as follows. Okay. If you can say the applicant submits as follows, it makes the task a lot easier. So don't make them long, don't make them rambling. Put them in a form where the Commission could, if they were so inclined, Commissioner, cut and paste them. Annexures. Look, if you love annexures, that's great, but use them sparingly because they just add volume to what the Commission has to go through. So if they're absolutely essential, by all means, bring them along, put them in. But when you're looking to add annexures, just think, do I really need this? Is it really going to improve my case, or is it just sort of padding it out so it looks impressive? Because I get a lot of annexures from all sorts of applicants and respondents, and I just think, why am I looking at this? This is nonsense. Typically, my finding has been that I've got to be very careful here and impartial, but it's always very good when there is a union involved because the submissions are always of a better quality. What a lot of unrepresented applicants do is they'll chuck in a whole bunch of annexures, like photos of their dinner, but not refer to them anywhere in the submissions and say, well, as is shown in Annexure F, you just get all these annexures, that are not explained, and you've got to, well, once again, can't just throw them in the bin. Got to look through them. Well, what is this? What does it mean, and why is it here? So, if you're going to annex something, make sure you explain to the commission member why it's there. You know, you don't need to be silly about it, but don't just chuck stuff in. As I said, it violates the be concise rule for a start, but it does cause a lot of confusion. Cover everything in the Act, even if it's not relevant. This is one thing that the law firms along the terrace do quite well. So if you're seeking an extension of time, the Act says the Commission is required to cover this. Put those headings in. Even if you just say the Commission is required to consider this. In this case, we say it's not relevant. Or whatever. It is a very neat way for the Commission to go through your submissions and say, oh, okay, right, so this is what they say about that, this is what they say about that. And you'll find that, as I say, the good law firms do that. They spell it all out for the Commission and just give it to you on a plate. Whoops, went the wrong way. And again, with the unfair dismissals, go through them, and you don't have to wax on for pages and pages. If you say it's not relevant, just say it's not relevant, but put it in there. Put it in there, make reference to it. Yes. This may seem bleedingly obvious, but it's not. It happens not often, but from time to time. Early on in my tenure, I got a submission from a law firm, and a reputable law firm, and they said, and we rely on such and such a case, which says such and such. I thought, I wasn't familiar with the case, but I thought, I doubt anybody decided that. That's crap. So, of course, helpfully, they didn't include a paragraph citation in it. So I had to go and read that decision, and that decision said nothing of the sort. Nothing of the sort. I don't know what the lawyer was trying to do. I don't know whether he had a brain fade and had forgotten what the case said or what he was trying to do, but that's not helpful to your cause at all. If you're trying to argue interpretation of a case, that's one thing. But if you say this case says this, and that case does not say anything like that at all, or couldn't even be construed with the most favourable light as saying that, don't try and lead the Commission up a garden path. As I said, we'll go and I think I can speak for the Commissioner here. If you reference a case, we'll go and read it. We will go and read it and absorb it. And if you haven't captured the essence of it, it won't do you any good. The other thing is with factual material. Now, I've heard it said, it may or may not be true, that sometimes union members don't tell their unions everything that their unions might reasonably be expected to need to know, and sometimes they present things in a particular light, and I appreciate that. So I know there's times where members frustratingly won't tell you everything you need to know. So I don't take those circumstances and give you any negative feedback on providing what the member provides with, cross my heart. But when it comes unstuck, as I'm sure the old grizzled advocates again, sorry Kevin, will say when it comes apart on the stand, it comes apart spectacularly, and it's really the end of it. I had a matter with, fortunately there wasn't a union involved, but the bloke had got himself an advocate. And the advocate had listened to this bloke and built up this big long story about why what had happened was unfair. And I read his submissions and I thought, yeah, that looks all right. And then the bloke got on the witness stand, and the advocate for the company, I think, really just trying his luck, or maybe just having a bit of fun, said to him, now, you've said this, but actually that's not true. It's that over there, isn't it? And the guy said, yeah. And the advocate for the company you could see him, he sort of said, Oh, so are you saying it's not this, it's actually that? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. And this advocate, you could see the beatific smile come over his face. He said, look, I'm just going to ask you a third time. Is that? The guy said, yeah. And that was the end of that. The case was shot to bits for the first 30 seconds he was in the witness stand. So I know that problem comes up, but misleading the commission won't typically work particularly well. This is another one. Look, not everybody, affects the same sort of sartorial elegance as members of the commission, perhaps. But I mean, I've spoken to members, not members here in WA, I hasten to add, but in the East, who they'll send people home. They'll say, I'm not hearing this matter while you're dressed like that. Get out, go home, have a shower, clean yourself up, and when you come back, then I'll hear the matter. But I'm not listening to you when you're in that sort of state. So when the members appear, it's good if they, present at least as they look like they're a functioning member of society. And look, if they're on video, try and get them to find a nice, quiet spot in their house, in a room on their own, and not in the car or at the footy or at the hairdresser. Now, I added hairdresser deliberately because that happened to me. We had a video conference, unrepped applicant, and we're getting ready for the conference, and my associate sort of walked into my office with a strange look on her face. She said, there's a bit of a problem. I said, oh, yeah, what's up? She said, well, it's the applicant. I said, yeah, what's wrong? She's at the hairdresser's. She's got foils in her hair. It wasn't a conciliation conference. It was a hearing. So she's got the smock on. She's got the hairdresser there, just putting the foils in.
It's harder to get a hairdresser than a hearing at the commission.
Well, it may be. It may be. But sometimes in this life, you have to make a choice. And indeed, I said to this applicant, well, there's two ways we can do this. You can leave the hairdresser and we can conduct the hearing, or alternatively, you can stay at the hairdresser and I'll allocate the time put aside for this hearing to writing my decision dismissing your application for your frivolous behaviour. And so she decided she'd probably carry on with the hearing and leave the hairdressers. But as I say, certain members are fussier on this than others, but if your members are going to appear, make sure they appear sort of in reasonable order. And the other thing, Teams is we find it to be a somewhat unpredictable beast. Always very good to run a test call with your member, because the amount of times we have problems with them logging in, and then we've just got to try and get them on the phone. If they're going to come in by video, test it out, make sure that we can see them and we can hear them. So that's sort of the basics of coming along with the commission. Some of the slightly more advanced work, try and find things that will stick in the commission members' memory. Because, and look, when you've sat there for 3 days and you've had 15 witnesses and, it's dragged on a bit. Not everything really jumps out at you, but I've had a couple of cases where advocates have said things that were very clever, and they'd obviously considered them because they presented them. It wasn't off the cuff, but they were things that stuck in your memory, and you thought, that is a really good point. And so you don't have to be aggressive about it, but if you've got a powerful point that you can make in a particularly memorable way, it assists, because, again, writing decisions is very difficult, particularly if you've had essentially 15 hours worth of hearing, you've got 15 hours worth of transcript, and you're trying to go back and piece it all together. Those little things, you think, yes, that was a good point. That was a good point. I have to chase that up. The other one is, look, I'm sure if you were a card-carrying AA member, you'd be getting lots of work and you'd be a proud comedian, but sometimes with some of the members of the commission, yeah, the having a bit of good clean fun doesn't go over well. I'm not particularly fussed. I had a conference this morning, and the lawyer appearing for the respondent referred to me as commissioner, and then was aghast and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Deputy President." I said, "Mate, since I've been here on the bench, I've been addressed as mate, Pete, Deputy Premier, Commissioner." I said, I'm not really all that fussed, but when you're there and you're in front of the commission, probably best to extend the commission the sort of courtesy of paying it its due and giving the presentation that you're making appropriate gravitas. This is another one, and I think Commissioner Lim touched on this when she was talking about your forms of action. Novel arguments are great to a point. There is no prize for the person who comes up with the most unique argument. I mean, if you have to make a unique argument because it's a unique situation and you've never seen it before and you'll never see it again, okay, I get that. But like all people, members will, when they're presented with something, they will try and say, okay, now where does this slot into my experiences? What is this? What is this case, and what are the guts of it? So, precedent is a glorious thing. If you've got case precedent, you can point to and say, look, this is bang on the point, and it is. It assists the commission no end. I mean, that might seem blindingly obvious, but rather than having lots of novel arguments and trying to break new ground, if you can ground your argument in precedent, the member will thank you for it. And even if you do need to be adventurous, try and be adventurous sort of within the established parameters if you can. Because as I say, it's for the member, looking at all this information that gets piled on top of you, you're trying to find a way through it. Okay, what's the thrust of this case? How can I sort of liken this to what I've got in my memory bank of experiences? So if you have to make a novel argument, sure, but if you don't have to, don't think that you'll get any prizes for it. The other thing is, don't make naff assertions. I haven't defined naff assertions, but look, perhaps a bit, I'm sorry I'm picking on you, Kevin, but a bit like Kevin, we're grizzled and old too, so don't try and tell us that black's white and up's down. We've heard all this stuff before. I try and maintain a fairly even countenance during these things, but even I've had occasion to get a little testy with people who continue to try and tell me something that I know is not correct, and I point out to them why it's not correct, and they persist. So don't make naff assertions, and as I say, what you run the risk of is annoying the member. And again, we're all human. I know we're all impartial and judicial and all that, but you really don't want to be annoying the commission member, and this is something that I'm sure you've all been taught in your law degrees and have picked up along the way. Just keep an eye on the commission member and what they're doing. I must confess I bunged it on with the trowel a bit, but I had a person in front of me just recently who was talking utter crap. Is that judicial language, Commissioner? Yeah, that was utter crap. And so I sat at the bench and just sort of went, I'm thinking, is the message getting through yet? No, the message wasn't getting through. But if the commissioner's starting to look around and sort of gaze out the window or whatever, or tap their pen aggressively, it's sensible to pick up on that sort of stuff. Think, okay, I need to change tack here. This is not cutting through. This is not cutting through. I need to rethink what I'm doing because I'm not working. So the other thing is, don't be afraid to question the member. I'm Commissioner Lim, don't hurt me. Do it politely, do it respectfully, and have your facts straight. But I think it's important as you go through, because commission members will, from time to time, so it's alleged, get things wrong. And, you know, that there could be any number of reasons for that. They may have been mistakenly persuaded by the other side's argument or whatever. Particularly, I think, for the younger advocates, because I think the older advocates will know, but don't be frightened of the bench and think, oh, well, I can't ask them a question, or say, well, Commissioner, with respect, have you thought about it from this perspective? Because, you know, it would not be unusual for a member to say, right, well, they're no longer interested in that matter. I've cleared the decks of that, and they're not on board. They're no longer interested. So don't be frightened of the bench. Don't sort of tell them what you think of them. If those thoughts are unpleasant, that probably won't help. But there's nothing wrong with you politely and respectfully saying to the member, look, with respect, I think this. I think this. I know what you've said, Commissioner, but I'd ask you to consider this. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And, you know, I know for all of us, you know, the first time up there, particularly if you've got a member with a bit of a reputation for making life for advocates miserable, you know, it can be a bit of a daunting task. But you shouldn't be afraid of engaging with the member and putting your point across. And if you don't agree with them, leave it on that basis. Well, respectfully, Commissioner or Deputy President, we don't agree. So that was all I had planned.